A private detective investigates a complex web of deceit, corruption, and murder. Listen as we chat about shockingly expensive concert tickets, a comically small gun, and the difference between scars and open wounds. Forget it, James. It's us finding out if Chinatown stands the test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says Gladiator with a glut, and Alan says as a father blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Test of Time, where I'm James Brief, and joining me is Alan Noah, and today we're going to delve into Chinatown. Not the parts of certain cities, but the 1974 movie starring Jack Nicholson and Faye Dunaway. How are you doing, Al?
I'm doing great, and just as you were saying it, I was thinking, should we have gotten some egg rolls and General Tso's? Is that racist? I don't think so. I mean, that's the kind of food you would get in Chinatown.
Well, I mean, this movie doesn't really take place much in Chinatown. It has a scene there, and they mention Chinatown, but I thought that this was going to take place a little bit more than maybe the final scene in Chinatown. So, no, I think it would be completely inappropriate to eat Chinese food here. I mean, perhaps if it was, a movie celebrating Chinese culture or something, sure, you eat that and get like method acting. This would be method podcasting. But no, this was more of like a 1930s, like every man wears a three-piece suit and a hat. That's much more of this film than I thought it had anything to do with Asian culture.
I'm just hungry for dumplings. I guess that's the bigger issue.
I do want to say I am fighting some bad allergies this season in particular. So in case I've had more of a deeper, raspy voice, it's not because I've gotten any sexier. It's just because my nasal terminates are completely inflamed.
Hard disagree, James. You are getting sexier.
Oh, thank you.
No problem.
But the biggest story of the beginning of the year was Taylor Swift's record-breaking, a $1 billion earning Eras tour. Her ticket prices were $600-700. And, I guess capitalism says, the market says a price is what the market's willing to pay. However, there have been some very big concert cancellations lately. The Black Keys, Jennifer Lopez, they've canceled their concerts. The public is starting to say we're not going to pay $250 for nosebleed seats for concerts.
There are the AAA top tier musicians, Taylor Swift, Beyonce, they're going to sell out every venue, everywhere, no matter what, in, a fraction of a second. And then for other artists who are big artists, it's hard. It's really hard. And some of these musicians don't want to play the smaller venues because, they were playing bigger venues just a few years ago or a couple albums ago. And they book these venues that they can't sell out.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, if you look at the top concert earners of 2023, it was obviously number one, Taylor Swift. Number two, as you said, Beyonce. She had under 600 million. Then you have Bruce Springsteen, and coming in at number 4, you had Harry Styles, and then you had Ed Sheeran. Coldplay is up there.
Interesting. Honestly, and maybe this is indicative of a level of privilege. I mean, I'm not a millionaire or anything, but I don't mind spending money for a concert. The thing that pisses me off more is when I can't get tickets. I tried very hard to get tickets for the Eras tour, for Beyonce's last tour. Olivia Rodrigo, she wasn't on your list, but getting tickets to her concert was next to impossible.
Absolutely. But that's a whole other topic. That's the scalping industry. Ticketmaster right now is being investigated, and there's a whole them and Live Nation, and hopefully this is going to come to the end of it. But people are ragging on J-Lo, and probably for many reasons, but had she just done not Madison Square Garden, but had she done the Beacon Theater, I think she would have sold out very quickly, and also the right price, because also people will pay those $1,000 tickets for the front row. But come on, if your fans are 17 years old, you want your 17-year-old fans to be able to see you.
It is insane and it's frustrating. Do you have any plans to see any concerts this summer?
I'm actually going to a music festival tomorrow. Those are still very reasonable. But I saw Beck earlier this year, and I saw him in Madison Square Garden, and it was maybe like $100 or something. I was higher up, but it was a really good concert, and everyone had fun, and I'm sure Beck made a lot of money. What about you, Al? Are you going to see any concerts this summer?
Yeah, in a couple weeks, I'm going to go see Willie Nelson, Bob Dylan, and Robert Plant and Alison Krauss. I'm really looking forward to that. And then Foo Fighters in July at Citi Field. And those tickets weren't crazy expensive. You know, like $100+ a seat for Foo Fighters. But let's get into Chinatown. You had never seen this movie. I had seen it once before. I think in college, I took a freshman writing seminar about mystery stories, and I think we watched this movie in that class. I really only remembered one thing about it, which is the big twist, which is like the worst thing to remember because that's a shocking moment of the movie, but also memorable.
Are you implying the part where we find out that this young girl, Catherine, is both Evelyn's sister and daughter?
Yes, correct.
Oh, okay.
That is the moment I remembered. I didn't remember all of the ins and outs about the water stealing and the water plot and everything. But for anyone who hasn't seen it or who doesn't really remember Chinatown, the movie takes place in Los Angeles, 1937. It revolves around Jake Gittes, a private investigator who is hired to see if Hollis Mulray, the chief engineer at the Department of Water, is having an affair. Jake photographs Mulray with a younger woman, but soon learns that he was not hired by the real Mrs. Mulray, but an imposter. Hollis is killed, and Jake begins working with the real Mulray widow, Evelyn. Gittes discovers that Hollis worked with Evelyn's father, Noah Cross, and that even though water is supposed to be in short supply, large amounts of water are being dumped into the ocean. That's because Noah Cross is causing a drought so he can buy farmland in the valley cheaply, which he will then irrigate and develop. Evelyn reluctantly tells Jake that Hollis wasn't having an affair. The woman he was with is Evelyn's sister and daughter, the product of Evelyn being raped by her father when she was a child. Jake tries to get Evelyn and her daughter out of LA, but when Noah finds them, a shootout ensues and the cops kill Evelyn. And all of that happens in Chinatown. So I don't know how successful this was at the box office. I know it was very successful critically. I know it was nominated for a ton of Oscars, and it's on a lot of, AFI lists, most influential lists and things like that. But how much money did it make, James?
It's various amounts that I've seen, but I'm going to go with the $29 million that I found. This was released on June 1st, 1974. It was a big hit. It was nominated for a ton of awards. It was nominated for almost every Oscar. I wound up winning a screenplay Oscar, won the Best Picture at the Golden Globes. It only had one unfortunate thing happen to it. And what else was released that year? Do you know what else was released that year in 1974?
Godfather?
Close. As close as you can be, Al.
Godfather Part 2?
Correct. So
Okay.
Godfather Part 2 sweeps everything. And number one at the box office was a film that I do want to do one day. What is the 70s in film? It's known for like one genre of film that the 70s was big on.
Oh, the disaster movies.
Right. So the number one film that year is, do you know what the number one, like the one that really set it off, that was like the big, huge hit?
Towering Inferno?
Right, that's right. That's I think it's Paul Newman, and it's I think the whole building's on fire or something like that. Yeah, eventually I really do want to watch that because that's a great question for a podcast like The Test of Time. Is a kind of a blockbuster actiony movie that really excited audiences in 1974. Will it do the same thing today?
Yeah. The 50th anniversary is later this year, so we could do that this December.
Sure. I think before we get into really the nuts and bolts of the film, the cast and crew of this film have to be discussed. Jack Nicholson. I mean, I know Jack Nicholson is kind of not necessarily an old guy, but definitely like a solidly middle-aged, Batman and the 90s films I knew him from. And then later the 2000s, he's more of like, your older gangster guy and the Departed. And But here, he is a young, handsome man, and he's definitely a charming guy in 74.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, he's very good looking. He really is the star of this movie in a very literal way. He is in every single scene. Every single scene. The movie is told from his point of view. And there are debates about how good a detective Gittes is, because there are a lot of things that he does figure out on his own, and there are some things that he seems pretty dense about. Some of it is stuff that, from a 2024 lens, is a little laughable, only because you would just Google it. You know, he could just Google Noah Cross and find out about Hollis Mulray and all of these things very, very easily. But Jack Nicholson, he is great in the movie, for sure.
Yeah, and Faye Dunaway, I had only seen her in a couple films before. She was in a film that I can't believe we didn't review when we reviewed the Christopher Reeve films, because it really goes along with it. But you've seen Supergirl, of course, right, Al?
I saw it once, yes.
Yeah, she's in that. And to be fair, I don't remember if she's bad in it or maybe she's great in an otherwise bad B film. But another film that she was in that I actually remember really liking this film. When my little sister was young, we saw the movie Dunstan Checks In. And,
okay.
One film that I had seen her in that was actually quite good, the remake of the Thomas Crown Affair. Have you ever seen that film?
I have not, no.
Because she was in the original Thomas Crown Affair, and that would be a really fun film to do two of them, because she plays a completely different role, and I think they made up her character in the remake. She's like a therapist who I think someone's telling the story to or something.
Have you ever seen Network?
No, I've never seen Network, except like Chinatown, I only know the famous lines, and I kind of know them whether it's from pop culture or it's from The Simpsons.
Yeah.
I just know I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. That's the only line I know of from that film. She was Bonnie and Bonnie and Clyde. Well, we're going to see these films eventually, but she's very good in this film.
Yeah, she is phenomenal in this movie. And I guess the third lead is John Huston, who I don't really know from other movies, but the interesting thing is that he is the father of Angelica Houston, who Jack Nicholson was dating at the time. So that scene in the movie where Gittes confronts Noah Cross and Noah says, "Are you sleeping with my daughter?" You know, that's an awkward, tense moment in the movie. Also, in real life, Jack Nicholson is really dating that guy's daughter, and she was on set that day, apparently, which had to make that even more awkward.
Wow. And there's another actor that I love. This actor, he's one of my favorite that guy actors.
Okay,
and that's James Hong. I don't know if you recognize him. He is,
of course,
he is fantastic, and he's one of the few Asian people that actually have a speaking line in a film, otherwise called Chinatown. One person we definitely do have to talk about in the cast, certainly to mention, is Roman Polanski. He's in the cast, he has a small role, but also the director of the film. I don't know much of the story, but I think that he had sex with a minor, and then he was going to be brought up on statutory rape charges, and he fled to Europe, and he's been in Europe since, because I guess rape charges never have a statute of limitations.
That is all correct. Yeah, he raped a 13-year-old. He gave her alcohol and Quaaludes, raped her, and there was a plea deal that he had agreed to, but then the judge was going to maybe renege on the plea deal, which is weird and shady, and he got wind of it, and then, he fled to Europe and hasn't set foot in the States ever since. He won the Oscar for The Pianist, but did not accept it in person because he figured if he got off the plane at LAX, he would be arrested instantly. And that's probably true. That story's fucking awful. It is horrific. And the fact that he directed this movie, which also is in a way about a young girl being raped, and he in real life is a man who raped a young girl, it's really just fucking disturbing and disgusting and horrifying and all of the terrible things. I personally am choosing to not focus on this as a Roman Polanski movie, even though, yes, of course, he was the director. I want to think of it more as a Robert Towne movie because he wrote the screenplay. And with all of the Oscars that this movie was nominated for, he's the only one who won. Robert Towne won for Best Original Screenplay. And you can think that this movie was well directed. I mean, it was. But the screenplay is next level brilliant. It is genius. It is taught in, screenwriting classes. Go and read this screenplay. It is held to a very high standard, and it leapt out at me while watching the movie. I'm like, this is one hell of a fucking script.
You're right. The script has some great dialogue in it. I do think that this film is slow at parts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I do.
I felt like it moved, though. Like, in terms of the mystery, in terms of the way Gittes was figuring stuff out, in every scene, the plot moves forward. And you can certainly say that you wish it had moved forward faster. That's totally valid. But I don't think it ever stops. I think it's always going.
I don't think it stops. I think it's kind of maybe slow is the wrong word, but I think it's kind of one of these 70s things where, like The Godfather, there's a lot going on, and I did have to Wikipedia part of the plot as I was watching it. There's an imposter, Evelyn, and then the real Evelyn, and I wasn't quite sure what was going on there at first. And I do think in a modern film, they would have explained it a little bit better, some exposition there.
I think they do a good job of explaining it, because then when Evelyn comes in, she's like, have we never met? No, we've never met. Are you sure we've never met? Yes, I'm sure we've never met. Well, my name is Mrs. Mulray, so the other person was an imposter.
Yes, but that comes later. I'm talking about the part where I don't know that this is Evelyn, and she hires Jack. I didn't get that the first time.
No, you're not supposed to. You're supposed to figure it out when Jake figures it out. I think that's deliberate.
And that's why I didn't think that scene worked for me.
Okay.
I do like the idea that in films that PIs and cops have this they don't really get along.
There's a rivalry.
Yeah, especially since it's implied that Gittes, Jack Nicholson's character, he used to be a cop. And so now he went the other way. And there's a great line when the cop says to Gittes, he says, "You must really think I'm stupid, don't you?" And Gittes replies, "Well, I haven't really thought about it, but give me a day or two." And it's just the way he delivers it. And then one of the other guys is implying that Gittes knows about this fake Evelyn, because when they go to fake Evelyn's apartment and they find her dead body there, Gittes' number is scrawled on top of her telephone. And the cop goes, "Isn't that your number?" Gittes says, "I don't know. I don't really call myself that much." It's great. And Jack Nicholson, the way he says it with, I'm going to use the word smarm.
Sure.
Yeah, there's even a line that's cut from the film, because I was reading about this film as well. And the opening scene, Gittes is talking to one of his clients, and the client he was thinking about murdering his wife. And there's a fantastic line that Gittes says that was cut from the film. And he goes, "You're not rich enough to get away with murder." That's a great line.
It's also a thematically relevant line that works for foreshadowing, because Noah Cross is getting away with murder because he is super rich. That line was supposed to be said to the Burt Young character, who we know, of course, from the Rocky movies, because he finds out that his wife is cheating on him. Later on, at the very end of the movie, Jake goes to his house and we see his wife with a black eye. It's not a gratuitous shot, but the camera lingers on it for just enough for us, the audience, to see, and we see that Jake sees it. Normally, he tells a client, "Hey, your spouse is cheating on you." They pay, they leave, the end. But there are consequences to that information. That's something that Jake doesn't normally see in his day-to-day work. But here he sees it. This guy went home and beat his wife, and now he's looking at her and seeing the black eye. At that moment, he's also worried about Evelyn and her sister/daughter, but it is kind of a realization that, these things do have consequences.
When I start to get the idea that this is a murder film, it's a lot more complex than I thought it would be. It's not just murder because I'm having an affair and I want to cover this up, which we don't find out till later. It's a very intricate plot of Noah Cross, who owns the water company. And I love that Gittes is like, he owns all the water we drink. And his secretary is like, yeah, what do you think is wrong with that?
Right.
This guy is that rich that he owns a utility.
I owned 2 utilities once.
Was it also electric company?
Yes. Yeah,
Ah,
yeah, yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, not only does he own this company and he gets away with the murder of Evelyn's husband, the husband found out about this intricate plot where Noah Cross was going to start denying water to all these farmers, and then their land was going to go bust and they weren't going to be able to farm. And then he was just going to buy up all the land, turn the water on again. That's a pretty clever plot. I mean, clever meaning it was more than I expected out of a villain in a film. I just kind of thought it was unique.
It is unique. I do like when Jake kind of confronts him on this and is like, how much money are you worth? You know, he says more than 10 million. He's like, well, then how much more do you need? And Cross is like, you know, it's just about legacy and it's not really about money. But this is based on real stuff that happened. I don't know how much you know about the Los Angeles water wars of the early 20th century. Do you know anything about that?
Nope.
Well, this movie is loosely based on a lot of things that did happen, and the movie takes many, many, many liberties. But Mulray is apparently kind of based on Mulholland. You know, it's not just Mulholland Drive. That is named after this real guy who did bring water to Los Angeles. He is credited as the man who built Los Angeles. You know, before Mulholland brought water in, LA was very, very small. And then he brought all this water in, and then LA started to thrive. And then the amount of water that they were bringing in wasn't enough. And so they had to start bringing in more water. And then, yeah, there were all of these rich assholes who bought up all of this land, knowing that they were going to soon be able to irrigate it and make it valuable. And then these guys got super, super rich. And Mulholland wasn't a saint like Mulray is kind of in this movie. And it's really intricate and really fascinating. And this movie is not 100% historically accurate, but even in the beginning of the movie where they're talking about building this dam, and it's controversial because there was another dam that burst and hundreds of people were killed. That did happen. That was like one of the worst man-made disasters in California history, or maybe even the worst, not counting earthquakes and fires and, you know, natural disasters and things like that. So it's interesting. Definitely liberties taken, but yeah, this does have some basis in fact.
That's interesting.
I thought so. The other iconic thing about this movie is the moment where Jake has his nose slit.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It is really brutal. The guy who slits his nose, that is Roman Polanski in a cameo. And apparently the way that they filmed that was really intricate, and the knife had to be held in a very specific way, and it could have actually sliced Jack Nicholson's nose. I like how he's wearing that big, huge bandage for the next few scenes in the movie. I did think it was weird when Evelyn takes off the bandage and then they start making out. That's not sexy, right? Like, after taking off the bandage and he's got this huge bloody gash in his nose, and then you're going to smush your face into his face and kiss him? There's going to be blood everywhere.
If I may quote Keanu Reeves as Shane Falco from the movie The Replacements.
Okay.
His big locker room inspirational speech before the big football game is, "Victory is forever, chicks dig scars."
This isn't a scar. This is an open wound.
It's not just an open wound. Doesn't he have stitches at that point?
Maybe.
Because I actually thought it was really interesting how they film a lot of Jack Nicholson from the other side, because then they didn't have to bother with the makeup. There was a scene when Gittes goes to a doorbell and you don't see the stitches. So I'm thinking, all right, they're saving all money and makeup time and quicker to film this day. And then as he's waiting for the person to answer the door, Gittes turns around in the camera. You see the stitches, and then he turns back around again. He's got that awesome scar, well into the film. I like that because I always think it's stupid when in an action film or something, when a guy jumps out of a third-story window and he limps for a minute or two, he's not limping in the rest of the film. No, this scar is there in every scene, and they do make it a point to show it, and I think it's kind of cool. Whether or not it's realistic for Evelyn to find it sexy or not, I'll leave that to the character of Evelyn, but, maybe she thought it was sexy.
Maybe. Speaking of Evelyn and her relationship with Jake, I'm calling him Jake, you're calling him Gittes, whatever. It's the same guy. The big climactic reveal, she's my sister, she's my daughter, she's my sister, she's my daughter. I really, really hate the fact that he's slapping her while she is confessing. And yeah, this is from a modern 2024 lens, but it's just so shitty, not just because he's slapping this woman, but this woman is the victim. She is the victim in this story. He is the hero of this story, and he is smacking the shit out of her. And apparently that was all Faye Dunaway's idea. Roman Polanski, whatever you think of him, apparently he was not very collaborative, particularly with Faye Dunaway, and they hated each other and they were at each other's throats. And she felt like the scene wasn't working. Polanski didn't really give a shit. And so she suggested that Jack Nicholson hit her, and that was the version of the scene that they went with. It's definitely powerful. It's definitely memorable. Like I said, that's literally the only thing I remembered about this movie. But I hate it personally, and I would argue that it doesn't stand the test of time. In a modern movie, that wouldn't happen.
I agree with everything you're saying. I have a different reaction to it. I think it's kind of irrelevant that this was Faye Dunaway's idea. I don't think,
I agree.
Because there was a woman director, it's okay, or a woman who thought of this. Jake didn't need to do that.
Yeah.
She wasn't being forthcoming. She wasn't telling the truth about who Catherine was, so she gets slapped in the face. I don't think this character should have done that. And This was out of character for Jake, who was, until this time, he's smarmy, but he's not doing anything bad. He's not cooperating with the police. He lies to the police. He kind of hinders their investigations. But yeah, that's all fine to do. I agree with you. Why did he hit this character? It was just a weird thing for him to do.
He's frustrated because he wants to know the full story, and he suspects that Evelyn is hiding something from him, which he is right about. However, that does not justify slapping her in the face. And then immediately he realizes that she was raped as a young child. And then, you do see it in his face that he feels bad. But yeah, that doesn't excuse the behavior. And the big climactic showdown in Chinatown is foreshadowed because after Evelyn and Jake have sex, he's telling her about how he used to work in Chinatown, and what did you do in Chinatown? As little as possible, because he didn't know if he was helping or hurting people, and he was trying to protect this woman, protect her from being hurt, and all he did was ensure that she did get hurt. And then Evelyn says, killed? And then the phone rings, and that's the end of that conversation. But the end of the movie mirrors that. He's trying to protect her. He's trying to get Evelyn and Catherine away, but with all of his actions, he leads Noah Cross and the police and everyone to the same place in Chinatown, and there is a shootout and Evelyn dies. That was not in Robert Towne's original script. He originally did want it to be a happy ending where Noah Cross died and Evelyn and Catherine get away. This was something that Polanski did insist on, that if the movie had a happy ending, then it's like every other movie. He wanted to have it be grittier, darker. And the other thing about Roman Polanski that people know is that his wife, Sharon Tate, was murdered by Charles Manson and his followers. Sharon Tate was pregnant when she was murdered. So first off, just making this movie in LA was hard for Polanski. That was on his mind. That was only a few years earlier, and he felt like that's a more realistic ending. It's a fucking bummer of an ending. Evelyn shoots Noah Cross in the arm. I had to rewind that because I wasn't sure why he was shot. And then 5 minutes later, he's running over and hugging Catherine. But it's because, he was just kind of hit in the arm, shoulder, bicep, somewhere. He's fine.
Evelyn looked like she was holding a little pea shooter. I don't know much about guns, but it did look like it probably held a 2mm little BB gun.
It is a comically small gun. When you rewind it, you do see that, he's going to be fine, based on where he's hit. But he walks away holding his daughter/granddaughter. Evelyn is dead. No one believes Jake. The whole water theft plot, he's going to get away with it. He's probably going to live with Catherine. And, the forget it, Jake, it's Chinatown ending. It's powerful for the movie and the characters, it's also kind of relevant for the audience, right? Like, because you're just supposed to say, forget it. That sucks. But, what can you do? And that's what that phrase has come to mean in any context, but even specifically in Hollywood, if you're working on a movie and then for whatever reason turn around, changing executives, it all goes to shit, then people might say, forget it, Jake, it's Chinatown, meaning, yeah, shit happens. What are you going to do? But definitely a fucked up, depressing way to end the movie.
Yeah, and we should mention there is a sequel to this film, a sequel that went through production hell and had lots of different casts, eventually different directors. Robert Towne was gonna come back and either write it and or direct it. In the end, it was directed by Jack Nicholson. It actually does continue the story. Jake is on another assignment entirely, but the story of Evelyn comes back, and we do find Catherine Mulray. She does come back in the film, and the grandfather, Noah Cross, has died and left Catherine all of his assets. So the story does continue, and he basically got away with murder. But the one thing I don't entirely agree with you is that nobody believes Jake. Because earlier in the film, the cops kind of have Jake on some, bullshit little charge that they could arrest him on, like lying to investigators or something. And they're like, all right, we're going to let you go. He goes, guys, this guy's rich and he's murdering someone. And they do listen to him, and they do decide to go and, look into these numbers. So I do feel like some of the cops do think that this Noah Cross, just because he's rich and a high member of society, I do think that there is some idea that some people might believe him, but they can't do anything about it.
Right. But James, what do you think about Chinatown as a whole? The movie, not the place. Do you think that it stands the test of time?
I'm going to say yes. This film does stand the test of time, as in it's a good film, elevated by wonderful, I'd almost say perfect acting. There's very little acting I think is bad in this film. I do think parts are a little slow. I said it's got a good plot. I love Jack Nicholson. And Jack Nicholson not only is a little younger than I remember, he is very strong in this film. There's a part where he's washed away by the current of whatever the waterway is, and he's thrown into a gate, and he's basically going to be thrown out into sea like that husband was, but he grabs onto a fence, and against the current he climbs out, and that's Jack Nicholson doing that. So I thought that was pretty cool. But the parts I don't really get is The Guardian. In 2010, it ranked films and called this the best film of all time. It's on AFI's The Greatest Films of All Time. Noah Cross is the 16th greatest villain of all time in AFI's rankings of films. I don't get that. To me, it doesn't get to that level. I'm saying this not as a film aficionado. I did actually watch the film a second time because I did want to give it the fairness, and I do think it's a good film. I'm not saying it's not worth the accolades. I'm going to, I'm going to humble myself and say I don't quite get what the art critics are saying. I'm not saying they're all wrong, but it didn't affect me in the same way. When I told someone they were watching, that I was watching Chinatown, they said, "Oh, I watched that in film class, and it's one of the best films ever." Maybe I was a little overhyped for this film, but to me it's good, and I liked it, but it's not the greatest film of all time. And if I had not known that, I would not have even guessed it was. So to me, it stands the test of time. I'm glad I watched it. What do you think, Al? Is Chinatown the greatest film of all time? Does it even stand the test of time? What do you think?
I don't think it's the greatest film of all time, but I do think that it deserves its place on those lists as being an amazing film, mainly because of the strength of the script. I think the script is really, really smart. It is a complex mystery, but it all makes sense. It doesn't really spoon feed you information. Early in the beginning, a couple of Jake's associates are following Noah Cross, and they say that they couldn't really hear what they were saying, but they only got one word, Apple Core, Or I guess that's 2 words. And Jake's like, apple core? That's meaningless, you idiot. And then later on, we find out that they were talking about the Albacore Club, which is where the senior citizens are who Noah Cross is buying the land in their name. At no point does Jake say, oh, before when you said apple core, you must have meant albacore. Like, they don't say that explicitly. That's there for you to get and figure out or not. You know, like, you can put these pieces together or you don't, whatever. I think the plot about the water is really interesting and really unique. And apparently the sequel is about, I think, public transportation or land. And then there was supposed to be a third movie that was going to be about the other thing. Like these 3 finite resources that made Los Angeles. And you need water, you need land, you need transportation.
You mean the part they used to own?
No, I own the electric company and the water.
Yeah, so B&O Railroad, you have the railroad systems.
Right, but then you need all 4 railroads. I mean, in order to make it really valuable. Anyway, this movie is somewhat racist to Chinese people, and that's not even just me saying it 50 years after the movie came out. In 1974, this movie was labeled as racist against Chinese people, you know, for having a lot of Asian stereotypes. It's not just that the final scene takes place in Chinatown. It's that the Mulray's servants are Chinese, and when the guy is talking about bad for glass, he means bad for the grass, but, you know, he's speaking in that stereotypical way. And, you know, there's that whole joke about the Chinaman having sex that Jake hears at the barbershop and then repeats. So it was controversial then. Also, there's just a lot of symbolism with water. Water is everywhere in this movie. It's in like virtually every scene. You see it, you hear dripping a lot. That is just a recurring theme. So yes, this is a brilliant movie. This does deserve its place on a lot of those lists. Noah Cross is one of the all-time best villains. I don't know about that. I think putting a child rapist on that list, I mean, yes, that is one of the most horrible things anyone could do, but that feels icky to, you know, praise him in a way for putting him on a list like that. I don't know, that skeeves me out. But yes, I do think this movie definitely stands the test of time.
I mean, I'll say he beat villains like the Terminator.
Okay.
He actually beat Jack Nicholson as the Joker. Jack Nicholson's Joker was good. I think Heath Ledger as Joker is probably better.
Yeah.
Top 5. Try to guess top 5.
Darth Vader's got to be on there.
Yep, he's number 3.
He's number 3? He's not number 1?
No, not number 1's. Number 1's pretty good. This guy won the Academy Award for this villain.
Shit, I don't know.
He enjoys Italian wine, specifically with your liver.
Okay, Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, Hannibal Lecter, number 1. Number 2, a good one. Norman Bates. From Psycho.
Oh, yeah, of course.
That's good. Number 3 is Darth Vader. Number 4, I'll get you, my pretties.
And your little dogs, too.
Exactly. And number 5, a woman who played this role so well, Louise Fletcher, that she was never able to really act again because she was typecast so hard. No one could ever get over how evil she was in this film.
Is it Nurse Ratched?
Yes, Nurse Ratched.
Another Jack Nicholson movie.
That's right. Have you seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest?
I think so. That's also another Jack Nicholson movie with a bummer of an ending. But so, as far as I know, no other child rapists. Just Noah Cross.
Number 40 is Freddy Krueger, who was absolutely a child molester. So there was no child molester on the top villains. You know, bad people on there.
Bad people who do bad things are on there. But that's going to do it for us this week. Next week, we are going to be talking about Beverly Hills Cop. There's a new installment in the franchise coming to Netflix, Beverly Hills Cop: Axel F. So we're going to review the original trilogy. We'll do Beverly Hills Cop next week, and then 2, and then 3. Tune into those episodes. Make sure you don't miss those episodes by subscribing to us on whatever podcast app you listen to us on. Give us a nice review, 5 stars if you don't mind. Maybe write a couple of sentences about why you like us on Apple Podcasts. That would be lovely. We are at Test of Time Pod on Facebook, X, Instagram, and Threads. And we'll see you next time, everybody.
Bye.